We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police. It's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them. Fund them with resources and training. Resources and training they need to protect our communities.
That was President Biden during last month's State of the Union address, pointedly pledging to fund the police. Never mind the fact that police departments are so overstocked that many across the country are now sending their extra war gear to Ukraine. It's clear now that this moment was no outlier. Far from it. The defund the police movement appears to be over, at least for now, including for Democrats. The president and his party have responded to the crime wave and the collapse of federal police reform legislation by retreating like an overwhelmed army in a losing battle. To name just a few recent examples, and there are many, in 2020, San Francisco Mayor London Breed promised to redirect $120 million from law enforcement to the black community. Instead, 2 years later, she is seeking to add tens of millions more to the police budget, and she has diverted more than $38 million of the city's federal COVID money to law enforcement. And in Los Angeles, where city leaders shifted funding from police after George Floyd's murder, Democratic candidates for mayor, including Congresswoman Karen Bass, argued over who would add more resources to the LAPD. And in New York, where Mayor Eric Adams has been clearing out homeless camps, the former police captain is calling for a $182 million boost to the NYPD budget to what is already the highest funded police department in the world. To put it into context, in 2021, the NYPD budget was nearly 2 times the entire military budget for the entire country of Ukraine.
We will do what is necessary to make all of our communities safe. You have my word as a former police officer, a fellow New Yorker, and as your mayor. It is essential that we empower our police officers and focus on the downstream impacts of crime and disorder.
Democratic strategist James Carville and former President Barack Obama have both expressed their misgivings with the term defund the police. While the term may have become problematic because it was so thoroughly attacked and so ineffectively explained and defended, the principle behind it makes all the sense in the world. It's about reallocating money spent on things that police probably shouldn't be dealing with in the first place, things like mental health and homelessness, for example, and giving that money to agencies better trained and equipped to respond. But instead of trying to fix what is essentially a messaging problem, Democrats are effectively giving up on police reform and hightailing for the higher political ground of locking arms with the police departments and pushing tough on crime policies. It's not exactly a profile in courage, but it's hard to be courageous when you are not allowing yourself to not be petrified for betting on your own principles. Joining me now is activist, author, and host of Pod Save the People podcast, DeRay McKesson. He's also the co-founder of Campaign Zero, a nonprofit that looks at reducing police violence. DeRay, thank you for being here. Always a pleasure to talk to you. So what do you think explains the retreat from, defund the police policies by so many Democrats right now?
One of the things that's really interesting across the country is that there was a lot of momentum in the summer of 2020 and going into 2021, and we should talk about the wins. There's good work that happened on restricting or banning no-knock raids across the country, starting in Louisville. There's been good work on restricting officer use of force. 19 states a year ago passed legislation that will restrict officer use of force. We've never seen that confluence of laws about policing happen in one year ever. Literally, it's never happened before. I think what we saw happen in this legislative cycle, though, is that the narrative about crime increasing has really spooked even our friends. Like, forget the people that we were never going to win. There are people who were our friends, who are our friends, who believe in what we believe, And this narrative about crime without any context, without people rooting it in the pandemic or talking about how we've never seen crime rates all increase at one time, homicide rates increase all at one time ever before in over 60 cities. That context is the lack of context has really hurt us. And the rise in crime wave has been probably the single biggest thing we push back against in cities trying to pass legislation today.
So do you believe that these friends that you're talking about, did they really have a change of heart? Do they really now not believe that reallocation of resources is the right thing to do? Or are they simply afraid that the people will not believe them and not reward them for seeking this kind of an alternative and this kind of a change?
So interesting. I don't even think that they're afraid of the people. They're afraid of the police. That the police are just, I think that we don't acknowledge enough how incredibly organized the police are, and they will do things. So in Washington state, Washington passed a very good bill around police, and they restricted the police from engaging in car chases without probable cause. That makes total sense. The police should not be able to chase you in a car without having a reason. Like that is easy, basic boilerplate. What the police started to do is that the police started to let people drive against traffic and wouldn't stop them. And they were telling people that the law said that they couldn't stop them anymore. And it was blatantly untrue. They were literally endangering people's lives to lie. And you just could not find legislators in the state of Washington who would say they were lying. They all knew they were lying, but you just couldn't find it. And when the police get up and say, well, the law doesn't let me stop this bad person, or the law doesn't let me get this person who committed a crime, that is convincing to a lot of people. And what you don't find is you just don't find a lot of legislators who are willing to say the police lied. We saw the same thing in New York City. The mayor is talking about rising crime and with no context. And you look at the NYPD's own data, murders at a historic low when you look at more than just the 2-week or the 30-day, but people are really slow to say that the police lied even when they do.
So the people who are most affected by both police violence and police overreach are very often the same people, and those people are the base of the Democratic Party. What do those people tell you when you're in the street and you're talking to them? What do they want most?
Yeah, what we encourage people to do in communities is email your state legislator, email your city council person, because when they hear from residents, they're like, oh, okay, somebody has my back. But normally people only, normally when it's in the news or when it's talked about, that's when you get a big outpouring of support. And that's when legislators feel the most confident. But in the off cycles, that's when the police are the most intense. They are not going to throw big rallies and stuff, but they are certainly intimidating legislators every day. And we tell people in communities all the time, if you get 10 people to write your city council person, your representative, it matters a ton. 15 people, 20 people might as well be a crisis. People rarely write them. People rarely call. Right. And I'd say don't do stock letters, stuff like that. That doesn't work as well, but just straight up emailing and calling is huge. That's how we've gotten a lot of bills passed.
But do the majority of those people say that they actually do want to reallocate those resources, or are they also spooked by rising crime and they want more policing in their neighborhoods?
No, I think it's how you tell people. So, people across the board believe in prevention. Every time we poll, people are like, yes, we want to put the money somewhere else. People don't want the police to hurt them. So if you poll any type of restricting use of force or oversight and accountability or any of the demilitarization, if you poll any of this discrete things, we win across the board every time. There are very few things that we do not win on when we straight up ask about it. But again, the police will come and say, if you ban chokeholds, then people will, we won't be able to stop crime. And that doesn't, community members know that's a lie, but legislators feel like, why would the police lie to me? And you'd be surprised at how effective that can be sometimes.
So let me just toss you a hypothetical, right? So if you had a chance to rebrand defund the police and not use that phrase, what would you call it? How would you explain it?
So, here's the thing about the phrase is that part of our work is to remember that we got to get you in the room. And for some people, the phrase works. That is a good way to get them in the room. For other people, that phrase is just not the best entrance for them, but they agree with us about the ideas. But the phrase might be hard. And I'm never fighting people over a phrase. I've talked about move the money. Move the money is how I explain it to people in my family. I'm like, we should just move the money to be around after school programs. And they're like, okay. And we explain to people, too, that the police rarely if ever, intervene in a crime as it's happening or stop a crime while it's happening. The police are normally a response. So when we explain to people, we want to stop the crime from happening in the beginning, people generally get it, you know? And the other thing that we don't talk about enough is clearance rates. How many of the crimes, what percentage do the police solve? You probably don't know that in the city of Baltimore, the goal for burglaries, the goal for solving burglaries in the police department, the goal is 10%. The goal. That's the goal from the Baltimore City Police Department. They on the front end say that in a given year, they're only going to solve 10% of the burglaries. When we tell people that, they're like, well, what are we spending the money on? And we're like, exactly. Put it somewhere else. They telling you they're not going to solve the crime. 10% on, that's the goal. That homicide is only 45, 50%, but 10% is what the goal is wild.
Wow. DeRay McKesson, so from now on, I'm going to say move the money. I'm never going to say defund the police again. Well, maybe I will. But anyway, it's a great phrase. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk to you.